Grease Pencil is amazing. It is a very powerful tool in Blender that you can use to create stuff like 2D animations, digital art, storyboards, animatics, motion graphics and many more, all in 3D space. Possibilities are endless. I have used Grease Pencil a lot for my personal projects, and I'm going to share tips and tricks I have learned on the way. I tried to pick tips that would make your life easier to start, and I will also show you some more advanced and funny stuff, so be sure to stick around. I also have more tutorials on my channel if you want to learn more. Also check out the description, there are timestamps, more additional info and links to resources. I have also created captions if you like to use them. I know so many of you are incredibly talented and I cannot wait to see what you create. If you are a total beginner with Blender, I recommend the Fundamentals playlist at Blender YouTube channel before you begin with this one. I know Blender can be intimidating and it takes time to master, but keep on learning and exploring. Remember to take breaks and have enough sleep. Hope you learn something. I'm Dante and let's go!
User experience.
There are 6 modes to Grease Pencil objects, where you can perform different changes to your artwork. Most changes made with these modes can be animated. This is object mode. This is the first object level before you dive in to make changes. You can move, scale and rotate your Grease Pencil objects in 3D space. You can of course animate them, parent them to other objects and many more. Some animations are easier to do in object mode, because you can take advantage of origin points. Of course, it all depends what you want to do. Next one is draw mode. It is for drawing your artwork. Here you have the best tools available for drawing stroke, fills, gradients and numerous settings that you can use to customize your brushes. Then there's edit mode. You can edit the drawn points here. You can move, scale, rotate, bend, shear, change the radius, clean points, assign materials, interpolate, sequence them and so on. It is a very powerful mode that I use all the time. At sculpt mode, you can modify large amounts of points very easily.
Hey, you talking to me?
Some sculpt tools only work with stroke materials and fills that have stroke added to them. Even so, it is a very powerful mode for tweaking your drawings. At vertex paint mode, you can draw and modify the color and look of your drawings using vertex colors. I'll discuss more about these later in this video. Weight paint mode is needed when you are doing rigging. Weight is stored in vertex groups that you can find here at Object Data Properties and is used to calculate how much bone is affecting the object. Switching between these modes faster will save you a very big chunk of time in the long run. You can normally change the modes up here, but there's a quicker way. Default shortcut for interaction pie menu is Ctrl Tab, but it is not very ergonomic to your hand. So let's go to Preferences, Key Map and enable Tab for pie menu. Now we need to go up here to change them. If you press Z, you can change the viewport display modes faster with this pie menu. There is also an option to hide overlays when you check extra shading pie menu items at Preferences. There are also many other pie menus in Blender, but I use these two all the time. Blender also has few presets that you can use for different types of work. Grease Pencil also has one, the 2D animation preset that you can see at the splash screen, or when selecting File New, or when pressing Ctrl N. And I highly recommend that you would use it. Not that there's anything wrong with adding a Grease Pencil object to your 3D scene and going from there. 2D animation preset gives you a ready canvas with basic colors and layers, and you can just start drawing. It saves you a lot of time setting up. 2D animation preset is its own thing, so changes you make here won't affect the other presets. You can customize your startup file to your heart's content if you like. You can add stroke and fill materials you like, change brush default size and strength, append brushes and add color palettes. You can add more workspaces up here, like a layout that gives you a normal 3D layout without the white background. You can duplicate your workspaces and make minor changes. If you move your mouse to a corner, you will see a symbol that lets you drag a new area. You can also press the right mouse in the middle of the line, and it will give you more options to split or swap your areas. You can change all these areas to be anything you want. If you want to show layers or materials, choose Properties. You can flip the navigation bar to the other side and hide it if it gets in the way by dragging. You can also join these areas by moving your mouse to a corner you want to join over another and drag to that direction. Or click the line and choose Join Area. You will see an arrow which direction the area will be joined. If you want to enlarge any area, hover your mouse over it and press Ctrl Space. You can return to normal with the same shortcut or pressing here. Remember to save the startup file when you are done with your changes. Also remember that if you need to reset everything and load factory settings, it will also load the default preferences. You can make your current preferences as the new default by saving them here at the Preferences menu. When you load factory settings, you need to go to Preferences and revert to saved settings. When you do this, Blender can also forget that you were using the 2D animation preset, so be aware of that. Always double check which preset you are changing and saving so you don't accidentally override anything. Quick Favorites is one of my favorite things in Blender. It is super useful. You can add almost everything to it. You can either click on a tool or a setting with your right mouse and set it to be a quick favorite. When you press Q, it will bring up the Quick Favorites menu where you can easily access all the things you have put there. If you can't remember where a certain thing was, you can use the new search and add a quick favorite from there. 2.91 also has a search field for settings. This will be expanded even more in the future. Draw mode is your world. You can paint in anything you want. Let's start by talking about the shortcuts we can use in Draw mode. I want to remind you about the Quick Favorites menu. It combines very well with everything you do in Blender. It is also mode dependent. When you press F, you will change the brush radius. And with Shift F, you will change the brush strength. U is for changing the active normal material. Y is for changing the active layer. I is insert frame. You can also draw to a blank frame, but sometimes you might have many layers, and this comes in handy. It also works at the timeline. H is to hide the active layer. Shift H is to hide inactive layers. Alt H is to unhide everything. When you press W, you get the context menu. When you draw, you can hold Alt and you can draw perfectly straight horizontal or vertical lines. If you hold Ctrl and draw, you can erase points. The settings you have here at the eraser tool will be how this will work. If you hold Ctrl, Alt and drag, you get this lasso tool that will erase everything where you draw. When you have the tool like the line selected, hold Shift and you will get perfectly straight lines. But if you also hold Alt, it will extend the line on the other side as well. Same principle works with primitives like the box and the circle. If you press Shift and drag, you get the perfect shape. But if you press Shift Alt and drag, the circle will be centered where you started drawing. You can still move these with G and use mouse to modify the shape. If you press Tab, you can return to editing before committing to the change by pressing Enter. When you scroll the middle mouse, it zooms in and out. Holding Shift and middle mouse pans the view. If you only press middle mouse, it will take you to perspective view. You can return to camera with numpad 0 or pressing this button. If you have many grease pencil objects that you want to draw to, you can press this dot at the outliner to switch to that object. The interaction mode you have active will be also active on the other object. This works in other modes as well. Timeline also has some great shortcuts. You might want to check what is the playback shortcut. It depends what you have set your space to be. Up and down arrow keys go to the next keyframe. Holding Shift and pressing left or right arrow keys will take you to the start or end of the timeline. Pressing Tab at the timeline locks the current active layer. You can select keyframes with a mouse. Selecting this keyframe at the summary line selects all keyframes on all below layers. You can also select keyframes separately on different layers. You can also use B for box select, C for circle select. You can also invert the selection with Ctrl I. Pressing A selects everything, pressing Alt A deselects everything. You can move the selected keyframes with G. You can duplicate keyframes with Shift D. and repeat the last action with Shift R. When you have multiple keyframes selected and you want to tweak the timings, you can press E to extend on either side of the playhead and move those keyframes only. You can also use S to scale. It works wonders when you are at frame 1. You can also slide keyframes that are between the first and the last selected frame with Shift T. And finally, you can press X to delete keyframes. Materials and vertex colors. What's the difference? Normal materials you can add and change here at the Materials panel. You can determine if it's a stroke, fill, or both. You can change the colors on the fly very easily. You can also change materials by assigning new ones at the edit mode. It is a very flexible way of working. Vertex colors, on the other hand, are closer what you would do in Photoshop. It's a more artistic tool. Combined with custom brushes, you can make really nice drawings very quickly. You can still change and modify these later on. You can pick a color from a default palette, create a new palette, or you can import your own. You can add new colors to the current palette with this plus icon, and remove those that you don't need. You can sort colors here. Draw mode is good for drawing vertex strokes and fills. You can use the basic draw tool, or add a tint to existing strokes with this tint brush. A good place for modifying vertex colors is at the vertex paint mode I showed you earlier. Here you can also paint, blur, average, smear and replace colors at the same place. Where vertex colors are very strong is the ability to randomize colors here at the stroke panel. You get different shades really easily and it can save you a lot of time. Brushes and how to append more. Up here you can see what brush we are using. There are few default ones and you can append more brushes from other blend files, like the great texture brush pack from Daniel Martinez Lara that you can download at Blender Cloud. You can find a link at the description. Just go to File, Append and select the blend file that has the custom grease pencil brushes. Go to the brush folder, select the brushes you want and press Append. Now you have more brushes to your disposal here. Remember that you need a decent graphics card for custom brushes to work well. Stroke materials. You can add new strokes with the plus icon and remove them with minus. Strokes can be a line, dots or squares. They can be either solid or have textures added to them. Dots and squares also have alignment options, which can alter how the stroke is projected. From the Specials menu, you can do a lot of useful things, like remove unused materials. These materials will be removed from the list when you save and open blend file again. If you suddenly want to change a stroke color to a fill, but the fill has a different color, you can copy the color by moving your mouse to the fill color, press E and select the stroke color. If you want to copy your existing material and make changes, add a new material slot, select your material, press this number to make it a single user. This works with normal fill colors as well. Fill materials can be solid, gradient or have textures on them. You can draw them by using the drawing tools or use the fill bucket tool. Remember, if you use the fill tool, make sure you have fill material selected or checked. Otherwise you'll be filling a stroke and it looks like nothing is happening. You can also make inverted fills when toggling this minus symbol or pressing Ctrl and clicking outside of the stroke that inside you want to fill. You also have options to select which layer this will be affected on. You can also have fill materials that have a lower alpha value. These are very flexible for shading because you can tweak them very easily, but you can also achieve this by using layers opacity or using our opacity modifier. It's totally up to you. Nice way to use fill textures is to use like a halftone or screen tone textures. Playing with the rotation and scale will get you stylized results very fast. You can also change color and lower the alpha value even more. I'll talk about layer masking in a minute. Holdout materials are a new thing in Blender 2.91 and above. We can set a stroke or a fill to be a holdout material. This means that the material will be transparent and it won't show up when you render. You can easily mask out stuff you don't want to be shown, like gaps you don't need. Just use the Fill tool. You can also assign holdout materials at the edit mode. Holdout option also works with textures. You can get a really nice transparent shapes by using a black and transparent image. Now you can make really complex holes very easily. So powerful. Drawing tool is self-explanatory. Fill tool has few settings you should be aware of. Simplify. Increasing this value will make more simplified fills inside the stroke. You can choose which layers the Fill tool will use as boundaries. Playing with the resolution will get you more accurate fills, but it is also slower. You can mask out gaps using holdout material. Eraser has options for dissolving, which is smooth, erasing points or entire strokes at once. Cutter is good for quickly drawing an area that will be removed. You can also play with the threshold value. Let's talk about brush settings. This shows what material is selected. Here you can select if you are drawing a normal material that you can add at the materials panel, or a vertex color you can change here. You can also use this pin. Now that material type will be always used with that selected brush. Here you can change the brush size and strength, and if they are affected by pressure when using drawing tablets. Here are advanced options for the brush. Input samples are basically how many points are drawn. You can see the effect especially with brushes that use dots or squares, like the airbrush. If samples are set to 0, you need to draw quite slow, because drawing fast will not be as smooth as you can see here. When value is set to 10, you can draw faster and looks way better. When you tweak angle and factor, you can write calligraphy letters easier, even with using a mouse. I recommend playing with these values to get the look that you want. This hardness value is a little bit tricky to work with, and I recommend to use the airbrush or opacity modifier set to hardness for the same effect. Next one is stroke settings. If you want your strokes to be smoother, you can increase these values at post-processing settings. Dream stroke ends is very useful, where intersecting stroke ends are automatically removed when you draw overlapping strokes. Randomize option is so powerful. With normal materials you can randomize these values and you get very interesting results. But when you switch to vertex colors and also play with hue, saturation and value, these settings will produce very colorful drawings in a matter of seconds. So strong. Stabilizing the stroke is useful when you want to make super smooth strokes. When you normally draw, you can also hold Shift for stabilizing stroke. And the settings here are how the drawing will be affected. Also, it's the other way around when you check the continuous stabilization. You can hold Shift and it draws normally. Next I'm going to talk about these extra modes at the upper left corner. This symbol means that the new strokes are drawn on the back side of whatever is at front. You can also arrange strokes and fills at the edit mode, so no worries if you forgot to turn this on. This is for adding weight data for every new stroke. You need to add a vertex group here at the properties for it to work. It will add a weight value of 1 to your new drawings. Next one is additive drawing, which keeps the old frame when you draw a new one. So basically you can make animations like this faster. Stroke origin and drawing plane are what you need more when you are drawing in perspective view. If we enable canvas up here at the overlays, we can see where we are drawing. We might as well show the 3D cursor so we can see where it is. Default setting for stroke placement is at the origin of the object. We can move the origin at the object mode, and it can also be rotated and scaled. When the drawing plane is set to front, you will always draw where the canvas is showing. You can also choose the side or top plane, and the same principle applies. If your drawing plane is set to view, you will draw in perspective view, depending where your viewport or camera is facing. When your stroke placement is set to 3D cursor, which you can move it in object mode, or modify the shortcut at preferences to be something else than the left mouse, you can click on the spot and draw from there. Surface is great for drawing on top of 3D objects. You can tweak the offset to fit your needs. You can change the stroke depth order to 3D location for better visibility. After drawing, you can parent your grease pencil object with the 3D object if you want to move them easily or animate them together. Setting stroke placement to stroke will enable you to draw new strokes that stick to other existing strokes. Guides are very powerful. They can be activated up here. Reference point is set to 3D cursor by default. You can show 3D cursor up here at the overlays menu. You can also choose custom location or an object like an empty. Circular lets you draw perfect circles around the reference point. Radial is perfect for drawing your anime action lines.
Nani?
Parallel creates straight lines. You can change the angle to be something else. Grid allows you to draw both straight horizontal and vertical lines. Isometric allows you to create isometric lines when you change the angle. And suddenly you have created a crosshair. Curve tool is very nice way to make clean drawings. When you draw a line, you get these blue anchors that you can move with your mouse. When you are done, just hit enter to confirm. If you want to continue drawing, press E and you get a new stroke that follows the old one. Just be careful not to press the right mouse button. It will cancel the drawing and you will lose your stuff you did earlier. Subdivisions. When you look at the toolbar, you might wonder, how I'm gonna make things like triangles? There's not a direct tool for it. The answer is using circles and this subdivisions value. When you put the value like 1 here, you get a triangle. If you hold shift while dragging, you can make a perfect shape. Once you release the mouse, you can still continue to scroll the mouse wheel to increase or decrease segments. This is also possible with older versions when you scroll the middle mouse down enough. You might have to go to edit mode. Select and rotate to get the angle you want. Default value for circle is 94 and you can reset it here. Other use cases, these arc and curve tools where you can also lower subdivisions. At lower values, you get this blocky line instead of a real curve that you can subdivide later using a modifier. If you use subdivisions on a tool that has a blocky shape already, it will only increase or decrease the points drawn. Let's go over how layers work. This is the order that you can also see at the timeline. Plus adds layers, minus removes them. You can change the order, isolate or lock them. You can toggle masks, onion skins, visibility and locking here. From the arrow, you can duplicate or hide a layer. You can select auto lock inactive layers. This means that when you select a layer, it will lock everything else automatically. You can also merge down to another layer below. You can also send the selected layer to another grease pencil object. This is very handy. Note that this opacity value is for the current layer only, and you can indeed animate this value. If you want to affect the whole object, use an opacity modifier. This checkbox is for using lights. Grease pencil objects can interact with light objects. You can add lights when you are at object mode by pressing Shift A and choosing a light. Playing with the placement and strength of the lights can get you very interesting results. Let's talk about layer masking. This can be a little confusing sometimes. So, let's say we have this square with a fill color and we want to draw something inside of it so it doesn't go over it and only shows inside. We need to use masking for this. Add a new layer and enable masks by clicking this icon or selecting this box down here. Choose the layer that is below. Order of layers is important. And voila! Now you can draw inside. This works for strokes as well. If you want to draw something inside of a stroke, you can move the other layer up and mask the stroke layer. You might have to increase the stroke strength to see it. If you don't want to see the bottom layer, you can turn the layer opacity to 0. Onion skinning comes very handy when you want to see what is going on with the frames before and after the current one you're working on. You can see them when you have a material that has onion skins activated and that the onion skinning is activated at the drawn layer and you are at solid view or viewport shading modes. You can set basic things here like what mode you are using, opacity, filter, how many keyframes are shown and what are the custom colors. You can also set onion skins to be shown at rendered view, but they will also be rendered, so remember to turn them off. When you draw in perspective view, sometimes you get funny results like this box right here. You can solve this by changing the stroke depth order to be 3D layers. Thickness can be set to world space, where you can tweak the thickness scale, or screen space.
Edit mode has more than meets the eye.
Edit mode shortcuts. There are 3 modes to select your drawings. You can change them up here, or press 1 to select only points, 2 to select all stroke points, and 3 to select strokes that are between other strokes. When you have a single point or many points selected, you can press Ctrl numpad plus and minus to select more and less points. L is to select linked. This is super useful. You can also press Shift G to select grouped. Ctrl I inverts the selection. Pressing A selects everything and Alt A deselects everything. You can also select or deselect materials at the Materials tab. Remember that if your material or layer is locked, you won't be able to select or modify anything in them. Up here you will find even more functionality that you can add to quick favorites if you need them more. You can change the active layer with Y. With M you can move points to another layer or create a new layer. You can press F to close points or join them with Ctrl J. You can split stroke and fills by pressing V. You can copy points with Ctrl C and paste them with Ctrl V. Duplication also works with Shift D, and repeat last action with Shift R. You can change the stroke radius with Alt S. You can mirror your drawings with Ctrl M and press an axis like X. You also have this menu. And finally, you can press X to delete or dissolve. Blender 2.92 and above will have this curve editing mode, which is super useful. It will enable you to tweak your strokes and fills using Bezier curves. The way this works is you hop into edit mode. Enable this curve editing tool up here or press the shortcut U. You can also tweak the curve resolution, threshold, corner angle and adaptive resolution here. When you click on a spot, you will see the points that you can edit. Enable this point selection tool or press 1. Now when you click on a point, you will get these handles. You can drag them by using your mouse or use the basic shortcuts. You can move, scale, rotate, change the radius and so on. If you press V, you can change the handle type. If you want to see all the handles at the same time, you can select all, or you can enable to show them from the overlays menu. All the edit mode operations are supported and more will be included in the future, so good. Gradients are great and easy way to bring more depth into your drawings. When you have a fill material, you can set it to be a gradient. It can be either linear or radial. You choose your 2 colors that will blend together with the blend value. But setting your gradient here using these settings can be challenging. So let's hop into edit mode. Make sure you have all the points selected. You can press A to select all. Here we have the transform fill tool that you can use to tweak your gradients and textures in a very effective way. Up here you have translate that you can use for moving. You can also rotate and scale. If you scale the gradient very small, the blending will disappear. You can reset the transform fill here at stroke, reset transform fill. There is also another way to create gradients that you can control with the empty object, but more of that later. Assigning materials. Let's say you have a character and you want to change one material to another, but that same material is also used elsewhere, like in another grease pencil object. So changing the current material can be a huge mistake. So you can add a new material or choose an already existing one at the materials panel. Select the part of your drawing you want to change and press assign new material. You can also select the old color with a press of a button and assign a new one. Extrude points. You can extrude points in edit mode. Select the points you want to extrude and press E. This is good for extending and tweaking your strokes manually. You can also extrude multiple lines, and you can do stuff like change radius that gives you this interesting look. You can also make a copy of the original stroke, then extrude points to it to give this weird three-dimensional look. Up here, you can select the transformation pivot point. These are very powerful and have different use cases. Now you can use transformations like individual origins and median point. Now when you have points selected and do things like scaling and rotating, the results will be different compared to normal scaling. Cool thing to transform is the 3D cursor that you can show up here at the overlays menu and change its position with your mouse. Things like rotating and scaling can now yield interesting results depending where the 3D cursor is. Proportional editing is one of my favorite tools. You can get complex shapes crazy fast. It is super useful when you want to affect many points with a fall-off, which size you can adjust with your mouse wheel. If we have a set of lines, activate proportional editing. You can also subdivide strokes to get more points to work with. Select a single point. Now press G to move, or R to rotate. Try S for scaling. Just amazing. This also works with other tools like the radius tool. You can of course select different fall-offs here. Maybe the most interesting one is the random, where you can easily create things like this meteorite. Oh! Shit! Separate strokes. If you want to split your drawing to multiple grease pencil objects, you can do this by selecting the points and press P. You can choose the whole stroke, points, or the entire active layer. You can of course join two grease pencil objects at object mode when selecting them and pressing Ctrl J. You can do all sorts of cleaning in edit mode. One thing I use very often is the merge by distance, which you can find here at the cleanup menu. When you have points selected, you can play with the threshold value to merge points. You can also dissolve points. Press X and choose between these options. You can also use this simplify option that also reduces points in your artwork. Not that you need to reduce points, but I think it's good to know when you have more heavy scenes. Reproject strokes. Sometimes when you have made a drawing and it looks okay when viewing from a camera or the view you have been drawing in, but once you change this view, it's all wonky and strokes are not where they're supposed to be. This can happen for several reasons. So the way to fix this is go back to camera view or to the place you have been drawing in. It all depends what you are working on. I like to draw using cameras, because then I have a fixed view where I can return to. You can select the points that are wrong, or all the points to be sure. Go to Grease Pencil, Cleanup and Reproject Strokes. Also add this to your quick favorites if this happens often. You can choose different settings and keep the original one if you want. In camera view, I usually use the front option. Now the drawing should be on the same plane. Wonderful! Animating with interpolate and sequence. You can do this in a few different ways, like everything in Blender. Let's say I have this drawing and I want to animate it going to the right. You can duplicate the keyframe and move it in the timeline, or copy these points to another frame and move it to another location. You can make certain modifications in edit mode and sculpt mode, like moving, scaling, changing the radius and shape. Just don't draw anything new between the first and last frame. It will most likely not work the way you want. Also, animating rotation can be tricky. All animating happens in the Interpolate menu. If you use Interpolate, you can slide one frame between the two drawings. This comes in handy when you want to play with the pacing when you use Sequence. Sequence is used to create the animation between two keyframes or an interpolation point. You can use these presets or create your own curves for the sequence. If you have many layers that you might want to animate, check the Interpolate all layers. You can also set steps how often a new frame is drawn. If you are working on something important, save your file before sequencing. At the timeline, click on the middle of your keyframes and press Sequence. You see these blue keyframes appear at the timeline. If you want to change the interpolation, you must remove the old breakdowns and sequence them again. This also removes the single interpolation points you might have done, so pressing undo and changing the settings is a good idea at first. Later, if you can't for some reason press the remove sequence button, check that the layers aren't locked, or you might still need to delete the dots manually. I suggest that you add these buttons to Quick Favorites menu, so you can access them easier. Once you get the hang of it, it goes pretty smoothly. Multi-frame editing is super useful when you have a lot of keyframes at the timeline. Let's say you have an animation already going and you want to tweak the selected frames a little. You can activate the multi-frame editing with this symbol and you can use a fall off if you like. Now you select the keyframes at the timeline that you want to see and they will all appear on the canvas at the same time. Now you can do stuff like edit the shape, stroke radius, move, scale, rotate, and do all the stuff you would normally do. Except now you are affecting all the selected keyframes at once. This also works at sculpt mode, vertex paint mode, and weight paint mode.
Sculpt mode!
In sculpt mode, you can toggle the same selection modes like in edit mode. If you don't have any of these selected, the process will work normally. Let's say you want to sculpt only certain parts of your drawing. First, toggle one of these selection modes on. Then you can use C for circle select a few points. Then you can press L to select linked. Or you can also select grouped that are on the same layer or have the same material. Shortcut for this is Shift G. Check out this selection menu for more options. Shortcut for deselecting everything is Alt A. You can also hop into edit mode and select materials with a click of a button and hop back to sculpt mode. Just make sure you have one of these selection modes enabled. There is also an option to lock layers or materials. Both of them have an option to lock unused or inactive ones, so you can really find the workflow that works for you. Now you can easily sculpt any area like you want.
Oh look, I'm a pancake!
I'm sorry. Shortcuts for changing the brush size is F, and changing the brush strength is Shift F, same as draw mode. Multi-frame editing works the same as the other modes. You select a bunch of keyframes and they appear at the canvas at the same time. So powerful. Many sculpt tools have these plus and minus buttons that indicate if you are adding or subtracting stuff. You can also hold Ctrl for the reverse effect on those brushes that have this plus and minus option. You can find more options for the brushes here at the active tool settings, like cursor color, fall off, and what they affect. Smooth brush is perfect for smoothing your strokes and fills. This tool doesn't remove any points, it only makes them smoother. You can also do smoothing with other brushes when you hold Shift while dragging. Thickness brush is good for tweaking your stroke thickness to get more stylized results. With the strength brush, you can tweak the strength of your strokes after drawing. Randomize does quick randomization of your fills and strokes. Grab brush, it does what it says. If you have a large brush size, you can place your cursor on the very edge of the drawing, and when you drag, you can make very subtle changes. Push brush is great for pushing, and it isn't like grab brush. Pushing also works from dragging far away. Playing with the strength will get you far. Twist is great for adding small waving to your animations, like walk cycles. Pinch brush is so much fun. You can pinch your drawings or hold Ctrl to deflate them. For the clone brush, you need to go back into edit mode. Select the points that you want to clone, press Ctrl C, go back to sculpt mode. Now you can make all the clones that you want. Hey, wait a minute. Object mode shortcuts. W is the context menu where you can always find a lot of useful things. G is for moving. You can constrain the movement with X, Y, and Z axes by pressing one of those keys when you are moving. R is rotate, S is for scale. C is for circle select. You can change the circle radius with your mouse wheel. B is for box select. You can invert the selection with Ctrl I. A selects everything, even the camera. Alt-A deselects everything. This selection menu contains more cool things, like select random, select active camera and select all by type. You might have noticed that many shortcuts are all the same in many places. Once you learn the basics, working with Blender will be a lot smoother and more enjoyable. Aligning objects. If you want your objects to be on the same level, select the objects you want to align. Go to Object, Transform, and Align Objects. You can choose if you want the objects to align in X, Y, or Z axes. If you press Shift, you can select multiple options. If this doesn't work straight out of the box, you can try different relative to options, like Scene Origin, 3D Cursor, Selection, and Active. You can toggle snapping on and off here. There is also a shortcut to activate this, and that is Shift-Tab. This is great for aligning objects efficiently in 3D space. You might have to add a 3D object for it to work properly. Snapping also works in edit mode. It's totally up to you where you want to use this. You can snap to various things like you can see here. You can select snapping to affect moving, rotating, or scaling. You can also select multiple options while holding Shift. You can also select Align Rotation to Target to get different results. If your surface isn't straight and you need to offset the drawing a little, you can press G to move and lock X, Y, or Z axis. If you press that key again, you can move in local orientation. Transform values. Every object has a default location and rotation that are set to 0 and a scale that is set to 1. This is at the world origin right in the center. You can see these values when you press N at the object mode. You can also open Object Properties tab. Now when you move, rotate and scale your object in 3D space, you always have an option to clear these values to default by hovering your mouse over them and press backspace. You can also choose to reset a single value to default by clicking the value with the mouse. There are also shortcuts that are Alt-G for location, Alt-R for rotation, and Alt-S for scale. There is also an option to apply these transformations when you have made changes. This is important when you are doing rigging. Also, some effects and modifiers might behave differently if the object is placed somewhere else in 3D space. If you think something is showing wrong and you can't figure out the solution, you can try press Ctrl-A and apply transformations, or set origin to geometry. It helps sometimes. Randomized transformations is best for adding variations to multiple objects very fast. You select the objects you want to randomize, go to Object, Transform, and Randomize Transformation. You can randomize location, rotation, and scale. Funny thing we can do is to go to frame 1, select all the objects, switch to Dope Sheet, add a location, rotation, and scale keyframe. Go to last frame, use the randomized transformations. Tweak these values like you want and add another location, rotation, and scale keyframe. Play your animation. So nice and efficient. You can do this as many times as you like. Look at them go! Origin point and how to move it. You can see this orange dot. That is the origin point of the object. Also 3D objects have this, and you can move it by selecting origins up here. This also works if you have multiple objects that are already parented. Then you select to also affect the parents. If you press W, you can also set the origin point to geometry and other things here. Many things depend where the origin is located, and this will make animating in object mode so much easier. Keyframes and Graph Editor. As I showed you before, you can animate a lot of things in object mode. Object mode keyframes you can see at the Dope Sheet or at the regular timeline. Grease pencil keyframes are a subcategory of the Dope Sheet, and they are different things. When you press I, you get this long list of different keyframes that you can add to the object. You can add keyframes for multiple objects at the same time. Basic keyframes are location, rotation, and scale, or a combination of these. Scaling and rotation is based on the origin point. You can also add single keyframes at the end menu or at the object properties. Remember to scroll forward in time and add the second keyframe. You can also turn on auto keying here, which adds keyframes automatically when you make changes. Just remember to turn it off when you are done. You also have more settings under here when this is activated. You can select one or many keyframes and use ready interpolation presets at the timeline with the T shortcut. You get nice animations very quickly. Nice way to take advantage of ready interpolation presets is this bouncing ball animation. You only need to have 2 Z location keyframes, one at the top and one at the bottom. Then you select both keyframes, press T and choose bounce. This is a very simple example. Testing these presets and tweaking the spacing of keyframes can get you very nice results. But if that isn't enough, you might have to go to the graph editor. I suggest you drag a new area and change it to be graph editor. This way you can also see what you are doing. When you have your object selected, you can see the animation F-curves. The more you have things keyed, the more transformation and lines you will see here. You can filter keyframes by typing like lock here and it will show you location keyframes. You can also hide curves with H and unhide them with Alt H. If you want to work only on a specific curve, select it and press Shift H to hide everything else. If your view is too far or close, press Home key and it will be centered. You can also clear the view by removing unwanted or unused keyframes with X. When we select our Z location from the list, the curve is highlighted and we can view it here at the active keyframe settings. Press N at the graph editor if this panel isn't showing for you. You can also hold Ctrl and scroll the middle mouse how different presets are drawn here to get an idea how they work. If you want to edit the keyframes by yourself, select the keyframes and change them to be Bezier. If you hold Ctrl and click on the curve, you can create more keyframes. You can select what type the keyframe is with V shortcut. You get different handles depending what you choose. You can also edit keyframes like in many other places. You can move them with G, rotate them with R, scale them with S. One cool thing that we can do in the graph editor is to use the F-curve modifiers that you can find here at the modifiers panel. If we add just one keyframe to our object, let's say it's the location, rotation and scale, we can choose them and add a noise modifier to it. Tweaking these settings and copying them from this symbol, selecting another transformation and pasting them from here, adding a little bit of offset or variation and voila! You get complex procedural animations very easily. Collections are very powerful. They are containers of your objects. You can add a new collection here or with your right mouse. Collection that has this area around the symbol marks that the new objects will be placed here. You can move objects to other collections by dragging them at the outliner or pressing M at the viewport. If you want to select everything inside the collection, click on the collection and choose Select Objects. If you want to delete everything, you can choose Delete Hierarchy. You can also parent objects at the outliner by drag and dropping one object on top of another while holding Shift. If parented objects are not in the same collection, you will get this gray text, but it works all the same. You can clear the parent with drag and dropping while holding Shift. You can also keep transformations by holding Shift and Alt while drag and dropping. If you have a big project, you can also add color labels to your collections. Up here you have this filter, which lets you add more restrictions to your outliner. Definitely useful ones are Disable Selection, where you cannot select the object by accident, and Disable from Render. If you have many objects in your collections and want to apply one of these quickly, hold Shift and press the symbol at the same line as the collection text. Best thing ever is that you can make an instance of a collection. Press Shift A and way down at the bottom you can select a collection instance. If you have a group of objects that you want to make a copy of, but you need to keep them linked, so everything you do inside the main collection will be copied automatically to other instances. You can still add objects to that original collection and they will appear at the other instances as well. This is also a great way to reduce memory taken by your project. You can change scale, rotation and location. You can also animate the instance, which makes this very powerful. When you animate objects at the original collection, you can easily add more life to your scenes. Nice tip for making changes when your grease pencil object is somewhere else in 3D space is to have a duplicate linked copy of your grease pencil object that you can make here or with the shortcut Alt-D. Now you can have one object at the default location when you can easily adjust your drawing, and the other one in whatever rotation, scale and location. When you make edits to the original, they will also be changed to the linked one. One thing to remember is that modifiers and effects are not linked automatically. You can, however, copy them manually at the outliner. You can have multiple duplicated linked copies. This is absolutely insanely powerful. You can totally use this with all kinds of animations. If you want to remove the link and maybe add an offset to your animation, select the object that you want to unlink. Go to the Object Data Properties. Click this number to make it a single user. Now you can move keyframes at the timeline, and the object is no longer linked. You might have to duplicate the first frame of the animation and move it to a frame 1 so the animation doesn't start out of nowhere. Let's talk about cameras and camera settings. Default startup files always have a camera ready, but you can also add one at the object menu or with Shift A. One way to move the camera is to have it active and looking through it. You can press N, go to View and lock the camera to View. Now the camera will follow you when you navigate at the perspective view. The way I like to move the camera is first to be in camera view. Go to View, Navigation and use this walk command. You can bind this to Shift F or use quick favorites. Then you can move the camera with WASD and mouse, just like in video games. E goes up, Q goes down. With space you can teleport forward. You can use the middle mouse to scroll up and down to increase or decrease speed. If you want to cancel moving, just press the right mouse. You can also animate the camera by pressing I to show the keyframe menu. You can also parent the camera to an empty and then animate it. You need to be in object mode to see the camera settings. Playing with the focal length and depth of field can give you very interesting results. You can also dim the outside view of the camera by changing the Passepartout at Viewport Display. Also enabling composition guides will help you to plan your scenes. Your scenes can have multiple cameras that can also be animated. If you want to have multiple cameras, you need to add one, or duplicate the current one, or make a duplicated link copy that changes when you adjust the first one. When you press the green camera icon, the active view will be changed to the other camera. Be sure to name your cameras so you don't get confused. Place the first camera to a point that you want. Go to the timeline and press M. This will create a marker. Then you press Ctrl B to bind the camera to the marker. You can also see these at the marker menu. Then you go forward in time and change it to the other camera. Do the same thing. M, Ctrl B. Then you can move these markers and play with the timings. This is the modifiers panel. We have a good variety of tools here that will add more functionality to our grease pencil objects without making any permanent changes, unless applied. People often talk about modifier stack, and that is because you can add multiple modifiers to one object, and the order of modifiers does matter depending on what you are going for. You can drag and change the order of the modifiers to get different results. You can easily copy modifiers from one object to another here at the outliner. If you press the small arrow with your mouse or use left and right arrow keys, you can see the modifiers and effects. You can drag the whole stack to another object, or expand the view even more and copy a single modifier. You can also select objects at the viewport. Select the one from where you want to copy and press Ctrl L. This will copy all modifiers from the source. You can add this to your quick favorites, because the same applies if you quickly want to remove modifiers. Select the one that doesn't have one and press Q and select modifiers. Array modifier is very powerful when you easily want to make array of duplications of your drawings. Remember that you can add as many array modifiers as you like. You can also duplicate an existing one. You can apply the modifier here. After that, you can modify everything separately if you want to add variation. Count is the amount of copies you project. You can change material override of the copies here. This is the same order that is at the Materials tab. Relative offset is measured by the size of the object. That can vary a lot in some cases. Constant offset is measured by distance, so no matter what the size of the object is, the distance will be the same. Object offset is best used with the empty. Press Shift A and add an empty plane axis. Check the empty at the modifier. When you move the empty, you can get very fast results, but you can also rotate and scale it and you get super cool effects very easily. Animating the number of the values can get you very nice results with minimum effort. Playing with these randomized values will get you very funny results. Build modifier is a very powerful modifier. You can get this drawing animation with a click of a button. This is best used on stroke materials in my opinion. If you want to change direction, go to Edit mode, select all, go to Stroke menu and select Switch Direction. If you have multiple strokes on the same layer that you want to animate at the same time, you can choose Concurrent. You can also select if you want to align the start or the end of the animation. Remember, start delay is not the delay from the frame 1 of your animation. It's the delay from where the keyframe is. So, if you have a keyframe at frame 20 and you also have a start delay of 20, the animation will begin at frame 40. If you have multiple keyframes, you can also tweak how fast the build modifier goes by changing the distance to be less than 100 frames that is set here. You can also animate this by adding keyframes to this factor value. You can switch to regular dope sheet, select the keyframes and use the keyframe presets, or play with the graph editor to get different results. You also have these shrink and fade options. Shrink inverts the build animation. Fade builds the animation the other way around. If you have a crowd transition and add another build modifier that is set to shrink, you get this back and forth loop. If you change the other one to fade and tweak the start delay or factor setting, you get this worm animation. Whee! Also, if you combine this with an array modifier, you will get different kinds of animations when you change the order of the modifiers. Mirror modifier doesn't need much explanation, but I'll show you how to make drawing a little bit easier. It can be hard to estimate where the middle line is and how you should go on with your drawing. So, you can go to Overlays and turn on the Z-axis. Now we have a line in the middle to guide us. You can also turn on Canvas at the Overlays, where you can also change its opacity. You can change the canvas size and color by going to Stroke tab, Viewport Display, Canvas and change the settings here. These make concepting things a little bit easier. Multiple strokes modifier is perfect when you are feeling lazy and don't want to draw the same line many times. You can easily change the amount of duplicates, what is the distance and offset. Playing with the fade values will get you nice results. Change the opacity to 0 if you want the stroke to have the same opacity. When thickness is set to 0, all strokes are equal. When it's set to 1, the further the lines go, they will get thinner. Changing the center value determines which side they are at, or if they are at the center. You can simplify or subdivide your objects using these two modifiers. Simplify reduces points, and you have few modes to select from. This is also a lifesaver when you have more heavy scenes. Subdivide increases points. If you have a curve that is drawn with less subdivisions, or you have merged points by distance, you can add a subdivisions modifier to make your drawings look round again. If you have made a pointy line using the polyline tool, you can use the subdivide modifier to add some roundness to it. You can also combo these modifiers to get different results and apply them if you want to make permanent changes. Rigging is great when you want to animate more complex grease pencil drawings or a group of grease pencil objects, like full characters. You can get more functionality, like bending, and more control when you animate your drawing. You can add an armature object with Shift A. You can also use Rigify add-on that comes with Blender. It has some meta rigs that you can modify to fit your characters. After setting it up in edit mode, you can parent the grease pencil object to the armature. You have different options to choose. Then you have to weight paint every bone and what the points are affecting. After that, you can control your drawing when you select armature and switch to pose mode. Rigging a character would be too long for this tutorial, and I have to admit that I am not very good at it. So if you want to dive further into rigging using grease pencil, you might as well learn from the masters. I added few links up here. Lattice is such a powerful modifier. You can displace and tweak your objects very easily. First, add a lattice object in object mode with Shift A. Move and scale it to fit your grease pencil object. This is best to do from perspective view. When you are done, choose the grease pencil object first, then the lattice object, and press Ctrl P. Choose Lattice Deform. This sets up the lattice modifier. You can also add the modifier manually and choose the lattice object. When you select the lattice, you can tweak the resolution. The more you have, the more small movement you can make. With grease pencil object, you can leave the V resolution to 2. You also have different interpolations to choose. The way this works is you select the lattice and go to edit mode. You can move the points and it will displace your object accordingly. Choosing different amount of points will get you different results. The thing that makes lattice so powerful is that you can add shape keys that you can use to animate the transitions and take advantage of the graph editor I showed you earlier. Go to object mode and add a basic shape key and one more key. If you set the key 1 value to 1 and go back to edit mode, now you can move and displace your object as you want. Add object mode. You can slide and keyframe this value if you want to animate it. You can have multiple shape keys to your lattice and they can all have different relations. You can also add a hook object to your lattice in edit mode by selecting a point or multiple points and press Ctrl H. This will create an empty object that controls these points in object mode. You can also select the same points and press Ctrl H again to get more options like remove the hook and so on. You can have multiple hooks to your object. They are added as a modifier to the lattice object. You might notice that now you can't move your object normally. You can solve this by adding another empty object and parent the hook and the lattice containing the grease pencil object to it. Remember the graph editor and the noise modifier? Add a single location keyframe to the hook. Go to graph editor and add a noise modifier. Brilliant! You can also add other modifiers to the lattice object. Remember that some modifiers require to have more resolution, and if you have shape keys, you can't change the resolution without removing them first. Then you can add like a wave modifier. This saves you a lot of time. Noise modifier is perfect for adding simple animations easily. You can see the effect when you play your animation. You can play with the settings and influence to get very interesting results with minimum effort. Decreasing or increasing the step value will make your animations faster or slower. You can also affect only layers, materials or vertex groups. When you toggle the custom curve, you can tweak the influence even more. Offset modifier is great for transforming your objects without having to think about going to edit mode or object mode. You can change location, rotation and scale here, and if they are influencing only a part of your drawing, you can of course animate these values if you want. Smooth modifier is very handy if you forgot to adjust the brush settings when drawing and want to get some smoother lines. You can affect position, strength, thickness and UV or all at the same time. Factor slider is how much you want these options to affect the object. Repeating this factor will increase the smoothing even more. You can also influence only certain parts of your drawing. Thickness modifier is very good for adjusting the thickness of your strokes without going to edit mode, sculpt mode or layer settings. Checking the uniform thickness makes every stroke equal size. You can also enable custom curve to get more stylized strokes. Time offset modifier is a must when you are making animated loops, lip syncing and other things where you want to change the frames separately. Let's say you have this 5-frame simple animation that you want to loop indefinitely. Check the custom range, set the end frame to 5. Now when you play your animation, you might see that the animation is too fast for your taste. Instead of adjusting keyframes at the timeline, you can hold Shift and drag the scale value to get faster or slower loops. You can easily do lip syncing when you have different mouth shapes drawn separately at the timeline. You can also make your life easier when you zoom in at the timeline and add markers to your keyframes, so you can see what the keyframes contain. You can add a marker with M and rename it with Ctrl M. You can also use this marker menu. When you are done, drag a new area and change it to dope sheet. Adjust your area that you can see the markers easily and you have more space to work with. Switch the mode to fixed frame. Add a keyframe to frame count with I. Move forward in time and select another frame and add a new keyframe. Continue this as long as you have done your lip syncing. Remember to select all frames, press T and change the interpolation to constant. Later I'll show you how you can add sound to your projects to make lip syncing more easier. Hue and saturation modifier. This is perfect if you want to fix your colors without tweaking every single material. You can choose to affect stroke, fill or both. Play with the different hue, saturation and values to change the color of your artwork very easily without going to compositing and all that. You also have the basic influences and custom curves. Opacity modifier is great when you want to animate the whole object opacity in one place. You can of course use influence layers or materials if you need to. If you have made a drawing using lower brush strength value, you can check this uniform opacity, which will show the stroke like it was drawn with the strength value of 1. If you check custom curve, you can change how much the opacity is affected to get some interesting shading. You can change the mode to hardness, which will give you this airbrush type of effect instantly that you can change on the fly. So powerful. Texture mapping is great for tweaking your grease pencil objects that have textures added to them. Check if your texture is added to the stroke or fill material, or you can just choose stroke and fill. With strokes, you can choose if the stroke fit method is constant length or a stroked length. Constant is great if you have drawn strokes using the same textures in many places at the canvas. Changing the scale will yield different results depending what kind of texture you have. UV offset is great for adjusting the texture placement more. If you have this type of distortion at the stroke ends, you can go to edit mode, select one point of the stroke, press Shift G and choose material. Now you can go to stroke, toggle caps and select both. You can also adjust your fill textures like you would at the materials panel. You can of course animate all these values. Blender 2.92 will have a rotation value to control the strokes that have textures added to them and are set to dots or squares. They also work with this modifier. Tint modifier will tint your grease pencil object colors towards the color you have chosen here. This also works with texture brushes. When the strength value is set to 0, the modifier doesn't tint your object at all, and you can increase it to fit your needs. Changing the tint mode to gradient will give you a gradient slider where you can add colors with this plus icon, or hold Ctrl and click on the area. You can choose different color modes and how those colors are interpolated between each other. Now you might notice that the tint icon has gone red. You need to add an empty object to control this effect. Choose the empty. You can play with the radius value or scale the empty and adjust it on the fly. Now you can animate your empty to get some cool shading going on. This works well with the opacity modifier set to hardness with lower value.
Michael Bay presents Effects.
Effects. Remember that you need to be in rendered view for these to show. Blur is great for faking the depth of field effect. You can also drive this with the actual depth of field from the camera settings, but it can be very slow. Colorize is a great way to try out different color combinations. Modes like duotone will give you very fast comic book-like results. Transparent mode behaves a little bit differently than the opacity modifier. So if you want to animate transparency, try them both and see which one works best for you. Flip will flip the object in either horizontal or vertical way, or both ways. Glow effect is awesome. It might not look like much. Together with a dark background, it will give you a glow that you would get using an emission shader to a 3D object and turning on the bloom effect. You can also tweak the size and samples to get better results. You can also check glow under if you don't want the glow to be up front. You can also change the color to black and tweak the threshold to get some interesting inner shading going on. You might have to separate the background color to its own object and tweak its location a little bit in the y-axis. Pixelate. It pixelates the grease pencil object. You can play with the sizes and turn on anti-aliasing on and off for different results. You can also do a whole scene pixelation that includes 3D object at the compositing. Rim is very powerful for adding additional shading without actually drawing anything. You have lots of options to choose, from color to blend and offset. I recommend to play with the blur values and remember to add more samples for the blur to look good. Shadow is great. It also animates well. You can play with the color and alpha value, offset and scale to get the look that you want. For rotation, you can type a value like 180 and play with the Y offset to get it matched. You can control the rotation and position with an empty. Add some blur, even a wave effect. Swirl. Add an empty object and set it to be the object driving this effect. When you increase the radius enough and move the empty, you can make very trippy animations. Wave distortion. It adds a wave-like pattern to your object. This is great for adding some glitchy effects to your grease pencil object. You can also animate these values. Remember to switch to dope sheet view. You can change if it's a horizontal or vertical orientation to get a different effect. You can also toggle between different interpolations with T shortcut to get different looks.
Welcome to my constraints chamber.
Constraints. They will add more functionality to your grease pencil objects and can save you a lot of time. I'll show you a few use cases, like the floor constraint. Sometimes you might want to set a line on which the object cannot go below. You can add a path object. Press Shift A, choose Curve and Path, and place it to the level you want. Now go to your grease pencil object and add the floor constraint. Select the NURBS path. This is dependent where the origin point is. If you press Ctrl period, you can move it. Press Ctrl period again to disable moving. Now the object cannot go below the path. You can also move the path higher and the grease pencil object will follow. If your drawing is on another axis, you might need to check another axis from here. You don't need to worry about the path, because it won't be rendered unless you have added some bevel or extrude to the path. Let's talk about tracking. Sometimes you might need to have your grease pencil object always face and track to a certain object. You can add a constraint like a damp track, lock track, stretch to and track to. They all behave a little bit differently, and playing with the track axis and influence will produce different results. Let's say we have an audience of Suzannes that we want to follow a certain object. We can add the lock track constraint to the object and target the object we want to track to. If you have multiple objects, set this constraint to one object first and then copy it to others at the outliner. Now when the tracked object moves, the audience will follow it. You can play with the influence to add some variation. This can save you a lot of time. With follow path constraint, you can animate complex animations so easily. If you draw a line with grease pencil, go to object mode, press W, convert it to a Bezier curve, add a follow path constraint to your grease pencil object, target the lines object and press animate path. Playing with the axis, curve radius, follow curve settings will yield different results. Move your object to the orange dot that is shown here. If you want to make changes to the animation, select the lines object, go to its properties, open path animation. Here you can add more frames to your animation. If you want to animate this by yourself, clear evaluation time keyframes and keyframe it yourself. I have made few tutorials about this technique before. In those tutorials I parented the grease pencil object to an empty object and added the constraint there, but both ways work. Now you have a path that the object will follow, and you can add more animations and not worry about the location of the object. Maintain volume is super great and it works well with grease pencil objects. When we press S and scale the object, the scaling is very linear and not very interesting. When we add the maintain volume constraint to the object, the scaling changes entirely. You can select X, Y and Z axes and the scaling will work differently and depends where your object is orientated. You have few modes to choose. What is the volume size and what the space and influence is. Switch to dope sheet view and add a scale keyframes to your timeline. You can get these kinds of animations super fast and it's so much fun to play with. One great way we can make use of constraints is that we can make an easy parallax effect. In this demo we have 3 separate objects: background, some background trees and foreground trees. These objects are all placed at different Y locations. Let's add an empty plane axis in the middle of the objects. Add a copy location constraint to one of the grease pencil objects and target the empty. We can select it to only affect the x-axis. We can test this by moving the empty object. Now, if we lower the influence to a lower value, it only moves slightly. Now let's copy this constraint to other objects by dragging them at the outliner. Let's go through all the objects and change the influence to a different value. When we move or animate the empty object, everything moves on their own. We can also invert the x-axis movement. We can still move these objects freely if they don't have any location keyframes added to them. Remember that you can use keyframe interpolations or graph editor with the empty object to get different kinds of animations. You can also add more constraints like the limit constraints to get more control how these objects behave when the empty object moves. This is a very simple example, but there's so many possibilities. This can save you a lot of time. Of course, nothing will stop you by doing this manually. Something in my gut told me there was still more to it. I had to investigate. You can add images and videos as background images if you want to draw over them. Be sure to be viewing from the camera. Drag your footage to the viewport. It will be automatically set as a camera background. When you select the camera in object mode, you can open these background image settings that you can tweak. There's a lot of options to choose. You can drag multiple images and videos to be your background image, or open them manually. With video, you can usually just start the playback and it works fine. Opacity is set to 0.5 by default. You can raise it, but then you might have to press this refresh button for the playback to work again. You also get to see how many frames there are, if you want to adjust your frame count at the timeline. This background image or video won't be rendered unless you use the viewport rendering for image and video. Be sure to unselect everything so you don't get this line from the camera or objects. I still recommend setting the render settings to match your footage and render this to transparent PNG and do the compositing in the software of your choosing. You can trace your images and videos in Blender and turn them to grease pencil objects. The way this works is go to object mode. You can drag your image or video from the folder to the viewport. Make sure you are in perspective view. If you are viewing this from the camera when you drag your footage, it will be added as a camera background and you cannot do the tracing. If you want to reset the transformation, you can press Alt-G, Alt-R and Alt-S. Then you can rotate it to match your view by pressing R, X and 90. Then you can go to Object, Trace Image to Grease Pencil. This will give you a variety of options to tweak. You can set the thickness to be anything you like. Increasing the resolution can produce better results. Playing with the sample value can produce quite stylized results. Color threshold will determine how the image is read. Turn policy is how the image is resolved. You can hold Ctrl and scroll the middle mouse to browse through these settings. Now you have traced your image. Alpha values will be preserved, so you don't need to worry about things like gaps with text. Trace accuracy might not be the best, but it's super cool to get a grease pencil object that you can edit and animate from your footage in a matter of seconds. With video footage, you need to choose these sequence options for it to work, and videos only work with Blender 2.92 and above. If you get any glitches, you just have to go and fix them manually. At the point of recording, color images and videos don't work well. Only darker parts are converted. You can bake 3D objects and their animations to Grease Pencil. Before converting, you can choose your 3D object, go to Edit mode, you can select the edges you want to be converted to stroke and mark them as seams. Then you can go to Object, Convert and Grease Pencil. Open this Settings tab down here and check only seam edges. You can play with the thickness and stroke offset to fit your needs. If you check to keep the original, you can mix Grease Pencil with 3D to get some stylized results. You might have to tweak the new Grease Pencil object for your 3D animations. Go to Object, Animation, Bake Animation to Grease Pencil. You can test these settings to get the look that you want. You can also choose the keyframes and only convert those. Playing with multiframe editing and proportional editing is awesome for this. Try it out. You can make interesting Grease Pencil shapes from 3D curves. If you go to Preferences, Add-ons, you can enable Curves, Extra Objects. Now when you press Shift A and go to the Curves tab, you can select Curve Profiles. There's also a lot more to choose. Even if you select one, you can select the type here without adding a new object every time. You can make so many things procedurally here, it's crazy. Let's make a star for the sake of the tutorial. You can tweak the points, twist and radius. When you are done, go to Object mode, select the curve, press R, X, 90 to rotate it to match your view. Convert it to Grease Pencil. Now you have to add a material to it. Then you can increase the stroke radius.
And there can be only one sheriff in this town. You got that, boy?
Blender supports expression-like drivers that you can drive things like transformations with time, or parent it with other objects. You can do some quick and dirty animations very easily. You can also make driver-based rigs, like a car that tires move when it goes forward. Easiest way to make this kind of back and forth animation is to have a separate object that you want to animate. Check that the origin point is at the right place, depending on what you are doing. Check what transformation value you want to add to the driver. For this demo it's the rotation y-axis. Select the field and type in this text, and you will get this back and forth animation. Playing with the values here will get you different speeds. You can also change the text to be frame divided by 20 to get this straight rotation. You don't need to type hash at front if you already have a driver added. If you want to change direction, you can add a minus to your value. These are so cool. In this demo, we have a car frame and a tire on a separate object. Tire has its origin point placed right in the center. Select the tire, test out which rotation axis we want to affect. For this is the Y rotation again. Add a driver. This menu will pop up. But if you move your mouse, the menu will go away. So let's also open the drivers editor and change the things here. We want our type to be scripted expression. Let's use transformation channel. Type set to X location. World space. Let's choose our car object. Now the car moves, but the tire doesn't. So let's parent the tire to the car. If we want to make the tire move faster, we need to edit the driver. var is the expression driving this rotation. If you add like a +5 here and press enter, the speed is changed. Your object size can also affect how much you need to add to the var value. You can also use multiply and so on. Now we can just duplicate the tire and off we go! If something goes wrong, you can add an empty object and parent everything to the empty. You can also change target object to the empty instead of the car. It helps sometimes. You can learn more about drivers at Blender Wiki. Adding sound to your projects will help you a lot with finding the right pacing for your animation. Will it be music, you talking about stuff, or just random sound effects? You can record sounds with an open source software like Audacity. Once you have saved and exported your sound to MP3, open up Video Editing Workspace. Go to the frame where you want the sound to start. Press Shift-A and select your sound. You can display waveform by checking this box. You can also tweak the volume and pitch here, but I recommend you do this in the audio program of your choosing. Now you should hear the sound when you play back your animation. If you can't hear anything for some reason, check that the sound file hasn't been moved, check that your sound settings are okay, or that your playback settings aren't mute for some reason. If your PC is slow and the animation and the audio isn't matching, you can choose frame dropping and sync to audio at the playback menu. At your default view, you can drag a new area and change it to be video sequencer. You can easily move your sound clips with G and place them where you want them. You can also press K to make a cut and make minor adjustments. This makes animating so many things much easier. Render settings. These totally depend on what you are doing, but I'm going to go over some settings I use all the time. Render settings are divided into two panels: render properties and output properties. Most settings here affect 3D objects like ambient occlusion and bloom. Motion blur might work if you are watching this from the future, but in this time and space it does not work with grease pencil. It does work with 3D animations when you render them with Eevee. You can fake motion blur with the blur effect by animating the blur value. Under film, you can check transparency, which will give you a transparent images when you render them to a format that supports alpha, like PNG and OpenEXR. Transparency is also needed when you want to use compositing and mix render layers together. We also have options to simplify our heavy scenes when we check this simplify, and down here the grease pencil box to disable modifiers and so on. Grease pencil also has anti-aliasing threshold that you can tweak. 0 is very rough edges, 1 is default, and 2 is a little bit more smoothness. Freestyle is great for adding outlines to your 3D objects, but it is not a subject for this tutorial. There are good tutorials out there if you are interested. Then we have this color management tab. If you want to import palettes or other images or videos to Blender, you might want to check that this view transform is at standard and look to none. Then the image will be displayed normally and palettes you import will have the proper colors added to them. After that, you can of course change these depending on your project. I use filmic and different contrast looks all the time. It depends what I'm doing. They add more vibrant colors to your scenes. Feel free to explore. Let's switch to render properties. Did you know that you can also type other values than 100 to 0 here? Type a value of 200 here and you get a 4K resolution. You can also use math with these value boxes, like divide and multiply. Frame start and end what you also find down here at the timeline. You can also step the frames here. If you set a value like 4 here, it will render only every 4th frame. That will get you this stop motion look. Frame rate, it depends on your project, but if you check custom, you can type 12 frames per second if you want to go slower. Time remapping is great if you want to tweak the speed. If you want to double the length of the animation, type a new value of 200, but also remember to double the end frame amount. Set a folder where you want to save your renders. Output is set to PNG by default, which is great choice if you have a heavy scene or you are using Cycle's render engine. But normally, grease pencil animations are rendered quite fast. Eevee is totally viable render engine for it. I like to render straight to video using FFmpeg and MPEG4 container. You can also render to a black and white video. when you select this BW mode. Selecting higher quality will of course take more hard drive space, and if you have audio added to your project, remember to set the audio codec. I like to use MP3 with the default settings. There's two ways of rendering your animation. One is here at the render window when you select render animation. Other one is here at the view menu under viewport render animation. This is a little bit faster in my opinion. Just remember to have the shading set to rendered and have overlays turned off. Compositing. Once you have render settings done, you can still make tweaks how your renders and animation will be rendered as. In fact, you can do crazy cool things, and there are a lot of great tutorials out there. I'll show you how you can make this fast vignette effect. Go to Compositing and use nodes. Add a new node with Shift A. Choose Search and type Ellipse Mask. Let's change the width and height to be 0.8. This will be the size of the vignette. If you Control-click this node, you can see the backdrop. Make sure you have this selected. You can zoom the backdrop with Alt-V. You can zoom out with V. Then we can add a blur node. Change the type to Fast Gaussian and type a value of 200 to X and Y. Hook up the ellipse mask to this image slot. Then we can add a mix node that we can set to multiply. Hook up the render layers image to this upper slot and blur to this lower slot. Hook this image node to the composite node. Changing this FAC value and these blur values will get you different results. You can move the vignette using these values. Then you can just render out your stuff without having to open any external programs. So great! Grease Pencil already has add-ons that add extra functionality and are extremely useful. I want to give a shout out to Samuel Berno, who has already made awesome Grease Pencil add-ons. Some of them have made their way into Blender. You can enable this add-on by going to Properties, Add-ons, and turn on Grease Pencil add-on. Here are the descriptions and shortcuts how to use the features. First one is Rotate Canvas. You can set up the shortcut here. You can rotate canvas very easily, making drawing with a drawing tablet a lot more ergonomic. Second one is Box Deform. This works in Object mode, Edit mode, and in Draw mode, with the last stroke drawn. Select your object and press Ctrl T. This will create a deform box, like a small lattice. Press numbers 1 to 9 to increase steps, or hold Ctrl and use the arrow keys. Select the points and you can deform them easily. Hit Enter to confirm. The way you can install more add-ons is you download the zip file from GitHub or other reliable sources. Most cases you don't need to extract the zip file, but be sure to read the instructions of the add-on. Open Preferences, Add-ons, and press Install. Navigate to the zip file and press OK. If everything went well, you will see the add-on at the list that you will need to enable. If you expand the add-on, you usually see more details or shortcuts for it. If you are a code wizard, you can also create your own add-ons for Grease Pencil and Blender altogether.
Dante presents texture process and fills for Grease Pencil.
You get a good amount of brushes and fill textures you can use with your own projects. This is a great way to support this channel and get something awesome in return. You can get this at Gumroad. Wait! There's more! I have also made a list of useful Grease Pencil shortcuts you can download at Gumroad for free. Remember, anything I said in this video can and most likely will change over time. You can read the changelog at Blender Wiki. Sorry if the pacing was too fast, but I really encourage you to make your own projects. You will learn so much more. Alright, thanks for watching, I'm Dante and see you next time.